So I'm really excited that we've got the 4 co-organizers of #ArtsHero here today. Be an #ArtsHero is an intersectional grassroots movement that emphasizes arts and culture's $877 billion value added contribution to the economy, highlighting the human and financial toll of letting that contribution collapse. We are a united sector-wide coalition, or they are a united sector-wide coalition calling for Congress to extend federal pandemic unemployment compensation, subsidize COBRA, and allocate $43.85 billion in proportionate relief to the arts and culture sector. They're a group that seeks to ensure all 5.1 million Americans who work in the arts can stay alive and in their homes with jobs to return to when the crisis subsides. You can learn more about them and their websites, beanartshero.com. I now have like their official bios, but I think given that you're all here to see them, I'm actually going to let each of them introduce themselves. Perhaps we can launch it out from there. You see, Jenny Grace has actually placed the website in our chat. So Brooke, Carson, Jenny Grace, Matthew-Lee, take it away. If you could just introduce yourselves and perhaps talk a little bit about how this thing happened, what it is that you're doing, and what it is you need to get done.
So many things. Well, should we start with introductions? I'll just do a short intro. I'm Brooke Ishibashi, she, her, hers. I am an actor, singer. I'm one of the co-organizers of Be an Arts Hero with these fine folks. And I was in New York for 11 years doing theater and moved out to LA around 2015 to do work on a TV show. And I've been in LA ever since. Met Christine at OSF when I was doing Cambodian Rock Band. Met Wilson doing an Insta Live last week. So we're very happy to be here, folks. And I'm also a core member of Fair Wage on Stage, which Carson Elrod founded, was one of the founders of. And I'm a counselor and an elected official within Actors Equity Association. And I will pass it to Jenny Grace.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jenny Grace Makholm, she, her, hers. I'm one of the co-founders and co-leaders of Be an Arts Hero, and I'm just so grateful and so happy to be here. I wear many hats. I'm a multi-hyphenate writer, director, producer, and actor. Yeah, I mean, I could go into more detail, but honestly, who has the time? I'm an activist and an intersectional feminist, and most of my work is about that. So I am going to pass the mic to Carson.
Hi, everybody. My name is Carson Elrod. I am an actor, activist, organizer. I was one of the founders of Fair Wage on Stage, which started with a conversation in my living room, which is about 5 feet away from here. I met a lot of you at the Yale School of Drama, where you all were so welcoming and kind and supportive, and it was just great to get to know all of you then. And I just want to say how proud I am of this beautiful thing that you've created, this community, and I'm really touched to be asked in to have a conversation with you all. And I want to pass it to Matthew-Lee Erlbach. And since Matthew is last, if we have different ways of starting talking about what we're doing, but like, I feel like I really want them to hear the galactic metaphor first. I feel like the first thing I want people to hear is Matthew-Lee talk about the arts solar system. I mean, it's evening here in Brooklyn, and I just want to hear Matthew.
Want to get into some astronomy. All right, cool. My name is Matthew-Lee Erlbach. I'm a playwright, screenwriter, actor, and labor activist. And I am so happy to be here with this incredible, diverse group of artists. Thank you for having us. Since Carson teed me up so beautifully, thank you. So we all, by the way, have our own, we do pitch meetings all the time with Senate offices and House offices and coalitions. And so each of us has our metaphor and our thing. that we like now contribute to the Voltron of our pitch. So early on, because I think visually, you know, what became really clear was that when we tell our economic story, the thought experiment that I like to illustrate for offices that don't speak our language necessarily or see us as an economic driver, we are big business because we're local business. One of the things that became really clear was, all right, well, let's just talk about this on a really local level. I'm from Chicago, so I'll use Steppenwolf as an example, which I always use because it's just readily available. Steppenwolf is a small business that hires, that has full-time employees, over 100 people. And Steppenwolf is a star. And in that ecosystem, orbiting around it is this highly interdependent commercial ecosystem of retail, hospitality, transportation, tourism. And so that 8 p.m. restaurant rush that Halstead relies on, and beyond, Halstead's very long. So that, and there's the subway station there, and it's this hub. And now Steppenwolf is building this whole block. It's going to be the public theater of Chicago. So if Steppenwolf implodes, everything that's in that orbit goes into this economic black hole. Now, multiply that across the state. That's the Museum of Science and Industry. That's Krannert Center in Urbana-Champaign. That's the Art Institute. That's the Lyric Opera. That's every organization in Waukegan, Macomb, Charleston, East St. Louis. And suddenly you have a constellation of arts institutions that collapse if they don't get immediate economic relief. And that's 224,000 jobs in Illinois over that, and $30 billion. And if that economic relief isn't applied immediately, then you have a galactic economic collapse in Illinois. And if you multiply that constellation of arts institutions, which is 675,000 arts institutions across the nation, then what you have is a universal economic catastrophe. I added that, Carson, just for you. So what we are trying to do is in that metaphor is saying, there are these stars all across the nation, and in that orbit are these community arts economies. Raleigh, Red Hat Amphitheater Raleigh is a city on the rise. Our first meeting was in North Carolina with Senator Tom Tillis. North Carolina, I don't know a lot about it, but in looking at this like deck of like, come invest in Raleigh, it's a city on the rise. Well, look at how many arts institutions are there. And then I looked at a Google map and I'm like, look at all the restaurants around here and the retail. You cannot deny in every district in this country that when you have an arts economy, it is clear that we are a jobs multiplier, and we are 4.5% of our GDP at large. So if you break that down at a local level, one of the things I like to say is, you know, $877 billion. Okay, if coal were worth $877 billion, you bet your bottom dollar every congressperson and senator would be elbowing each other to put a floor underneath $877 billion 3 months ago. So it's ridiculous to us that we are not taken seriously. So we are speaking in this economic language. And that's why that's why we exist, is to change the story of the arts. For the last several decades, the story we've been telling about ourselves in government has not been working. And what we are doing is trying to rewrite the narrative of who arts workers are, what arts workers are, and where arts workers are. And it's working. So with that, I will pass it back to you, Christine, or Brooke. Do you want to jump in?
Well, Carson, I would love for you to dip into the airlines, and then you shared new information with us today. Yeah. I think this is very piggybacking off of what Matt said.
I mean, it's frustrating because as what Matt said is we're here to change the conversation about the creative economy, because clearly there's something wrong with the conversation. If we add $265 billion more to the United States economy every year than all of transportation, and we're not being relieved in the same way that transportation is, then something's wrong. And just even before we came onto this conversation, we had our last Zoom that ended about a half an hour ago. And so like while I was shoving a burrito in my mouth and listening to NPR, I heard another story on NPR. It was a 3.5-minute story that was talking about how the CARES Act relief for the airlines is about to run out, right? So what that's going to translate into is mass layoffs. And all of these people that work for the airlines are going to be tasting unemployment for the first time. And they were on NPR, rightly, by the way, livid. But here's the thing. they've been living for 6 months with their paychecks because their bosses and their airlines got $50 billion in relief. And that relief kept all of those people on payroll. So that has not happened for the arts and culture economy. There was $75 million. There was PPP stuff that a lot of people were able to get, but it went away very quickly. But actual dedicated arts and culture relief was $75 million, and it was blown through in the matter of a week. And so we were the first things to close. We're going to be the last things to open. The Metropolitan Opera today just said that they're not going to open for at least another year. You know, the Brooklyn Museum of Art just said that they're selling off the best works in their collection to keep the lights on. So as Matthew noted, we are looking at the floor crumbling out from underneath our sector because we've been left out of the relief conversation. And so what Be an Arts Hero exists to do is change the conversation by having the conversation. And that's what we're doing all day, every day. We started Scrappy and Small 10 weeks ago. Or about 12 weeks ago now. And at this point, we've met with 60 Senate offices. We're starting to talk to House offices. We are in meetings with representatives and their staffs all day, every day, walking them through how the creative economy works, what the consequences of letting it fail are, and then giving them a story about what will happen if they relieve us and then invest in us, because we are such a reliable fountain of sunshine and money. Richard Florida said, if you want to know where an economic boom is going to be, look for where artists are. And so with a growth rate of 4.16%, which is nearly double that of the rest of the economy, an intrepid senator who is looking at the United States economy. We're in the worst economic collapse since the darkest days of the Great Depression. So if you're looking on how to rebuild the American economy, one, there can be no American economic recovery without an arts recovery. And two, we are one of the best bets for a recovery. Invest in us, and your neighborhood and your city will flourish and bloom, and you see it all the time. So anyway, I could go on all night, but I'll slow down.
You know what's interesting is we talk about the airline industry as a parallel, right? As a model for what we should have been getting all along, right? And in no way do we want to diminish the idea that there were airline workers who were furloughed. We're very aware of that fact. But the reason why we cite that as an example is that, you know, if as Carson said, if we provide $265 billion more than all of transportation combined, not just transportation, not just airlines, but not just 10 airlines, but all of transportation combined, right? Why are we not receiving proportionate relief? So this is why we come to the table, because we say we're here to change the conversation. We're here to change the narrative, right? We are a creative economy. Artists are arts workers. We are laborers. We are a workforce. We are a labor movement. So when we talk about our industries, we're redefining it as an arts economy so that arts workers can now tie their value to an intrinsic economic worth, a dollar amount, instead of, oh, it's just the feel-good stuff that no one can really, that's not tangible, right? Because that has not gotten us very far in terms of federal relief, right? So we're here to change that conversation, you know, and something that Jenny Grace coined for us a while back, our thesis is that our mission is to keep all 5.1 million arts workers alive, keep them in their homes, not getting evicted, keep them with jobs to return to when the crisis subsides. Because what we're realizing through this crisis is it's furthering the gap, and it's the racial inequalities, the social inequalities that already existed before the pandemic. They're just, you know, that gap just keeps growing deeper and deeper, wider and wider, right, throughout this crisis. And so as we see that the most marginalized, oppressed, and disadvantaged groups are disproportionately negatively impacted by the pandemic, they are now disproportionately negatively impacted by the effects of the COVID crisis on our arts and culture sector at large. If we just talk about evictions, I mean, frankly, at this point, within the next couple months, 40 million people could get evicted. That's disproportionately going to impact Black and Hispanic communities who are already dying at higher rates than everybody else, right? So it's like a 1-2 punch, and they don't have a fighting chance to survive. So as we come here and we advocate for arts relief, we are advocating for so much more than that, because as Carson says, if we spray a giant fire hose of sunshine and money over the entire arts and culture sector, and we put out and we help with relief in that respect, you know, we are seeking to keep the institutions intact so that they can keep employing their employees. So it's so much more about just saving buildings, you know, it's about saving the people. So that we can get through this crisis together. Jenny is really wonderful. I would actually love to hear from her about when we talk about existing legislation and when we go into these senator meetings, they say, well, what about these bills that are already on the floor? You know, we talk about Restart, we talk about SOS, you know, why aren't they good enough? What are the deficiencies, da, 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 da. And Jenny, if you want to speak about it, is so articulate about how our legislation, the Dawn Act, is so much more comprehensive. And Jenny, did you want to speak to that in any way?
Sure. I mean, first of all, I just want to sort of make sure that I don't remember if we actually said the actual number. So in case you all don't know, the arts and culture sector contributes $877 billion to the United States economy. And there is not a single state in our union, nor in the District of Columbia or Puerto Rico, in which the arts and culture sector doesn't contribute billions with a B to that area's economy and doesn't employ tens of thousands of workers. So one of the things that we realized when we were having this conversation is that we needed to change the way that we talk about our sector. And we needed to talk about it in language that those in the halls of power understand. So instead of talking about the social goods and the intrinsic moral value, let's say, of the arts and culture sector, we're talking in dollars and cents, and that's on purpose. So within that, we're also changing how we refer to ourselves. We no longer refer to ourselves as artists, even though some of us in the sector are artists, but rather arts workers. And part of the reason why we do that is to be inclusive of those who are impacted and who work in the arts and culture sector, but who don't identify as artists. You know, we have ushers, we have janitorial staff, we have administrative staff, we have technicians that wouldn't necessarily consider themselves artists, and yet they are a vital backbone of the arts and culture sector. So a term we have adopted is using the term arts workers. So when we talk about SOS, that's sort of why that comes into play, right? Because SOS focuses, rightly so, on a portion of our sector that is in grave peril. 90% of music venues say that they will not reopen, or not confident they'll reopen. So that is a real danger and a real concern. So within this conversation, we have to understand that the reason why certain bills are you know, there seem to be so many different kinds of bills, right, that encompass different concerns within our sector. And one of the things that sets Be an Arts Hero apart is that we're not looking for scraps for just the portion of the sector that applies to us. You know, a lot of us are in theater, you know, Matthew works as a writer in television, you know, like we're not just asking for a little piece of the pie for theater or for television. What we're trying to do is build a floor underneath the entire sector, because the entire sector has been defunded and delegitimized for decades now. And so what that has led to, with great empathy towards everyone trying to survive this time, is folks from portions of our sector just fighting for themselves. And what we're asking to do is to rather fight to unify and to collectively bargain, right? And that's the way forward, because together, 877 billion is a number that you can't argue with. If we just talk about what theater does, or what dance does, or what museums do, or what libraries do, you know, that's when things get a little bit complicated. The more we're divided, the less power we have. So within that, I can talk a little bit about SOS, but I also want to speak with great compassion about SOS, because SOS is addressing a real problem and doing so effectively. And what we're seeking to do is, yes, end SOS rather than to say, you know, pardon my French, but fuck SOS, they suck. No, we're not saying that at all. We're in great solidarity with what they're doing. So within that, just very quickly, as the bill stands now, it allocates PPP funding to performing arts venues, to producers, promoters, and talent agencies. Those portions of the arts and culture sector, as I said before, certainly need our help. As I said, 90% of surveyed music venues are not confident they'll reopen. Talent agencies are facing massive firing and potential bankruptcies, and we must do everything that we can to help these arts and culture businesses. But what this bill fails to acknowledge is that the other arts and culture businesses that constitute our sector, those are not covered. And those are businesses with which those businesses implicitly rely in order to reopen and sustain themselves. So, for example, theater and music venues may apply for aid, but costume shops, instrument shops, set design studios, lighting design studios, AV and audio houses, music studios, those are not eligible to or included in this relief package. So to put it into context, let's say Broadway houses are covered by this and they're able to pay their rent and pay their employees. They reopen to what? Where are the actors or performers on that stage? They've all moved out. They've all moved out of the city. They can't afford to live here anymore. What about the costumes that they would put on those actors or performers? All the costume shops are closed. What about the mics, the lighting, the set design? Any portion of that, you know, the ushers and those who are not full-time employees of this venue, they're not covered in this. So we applaud what they're trying to do, and we're not against it. But what we're seeking to do is create a more holistic approach to a complex and holistic problem. You know, this bill doesn't. It fails to address the devastating impact of this crisis on the individual arts worker. While percentage of relief may be allocated to payroll of employees, the vast majority of arts workers are freelancers or operating under short-term contracts or 1099s, and they're not covered under SOS. It doesn't offer relief to our unions, who are very much suffering right now. Their health insurance budgets are derived from the working dues of their members, and their members are not working. So our unions are faced with impossible choices, forcing many to kick off members from life-saving health insurance in the middle of a pandemic. And that doesn't even count like insulin or heart medication or cancer treatments that are not, you know, that also, they can't fall off of their insurance even if we weren't in the middle of a pandemic. So we support any step in the right direction, obviously, as long as there's an acknowledgement that this is the beginning, not the end of the conversation. So that's sort of where we land with that and what we're trying to do with Dawn. So I feel like Matthew speaks really beautifully about Dawn because it's his language and he wrote it. And I would love to pass the mic to Matthew.
Is it okay, Matt, before you go into your beautiful, beautiful story about Dawn, can I piggyback about SOS Restart real quick?
Absolutely.
You know, Jenny articulated it so beautifully. And what I want to add is that, you know, as we say we want a holistic, comprehensive, long-term solution, Restart and SOS, which are really like, you know, some of the only real bills that are on the floor getting some traction right now on the Hill, they're only talking about 6 months worth of coverage for payroll, benefits, et cetera, et cetera. And we need more than 6 months coverage. That's, you know, we're already more than 6 months into the crisis. So we've seen how much, what a chunk of time like that is and how quickly that flies by, right? How quickly those funds run out. Also, we're talking about loans when most independent venues, most folks in our industry are in no place whatsoever to take out loans. So when Matthew talks about the Dawn Act, you know, we are looking at we say we want to yes and all of the Restart and SOS, everything they bring to the table. And while we do that, we're looking for a more comprehensive solution that will help more people Matthew?
Yeah, look, I mean, this is a great time to talk about arts policy because there's a few policy proposals out there, which is really exciting because there's a recognition that in order for our country, who is facing an economic wildfire, you're going to need a lot of water to get the growth to come up as quickly as possible. And what Dawn does is and some of this is going to address Luke's excellent and necessary question, which is we want the government, we don't want to create any new government. We want to take existing infrastructures and empower the National Endowment for the Arts, the National Endowment for the Humanities, the Institute of Museum and Library Services, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and the SBA. And we want to take these infrastructures that already have dispersal mechanisms, that have already given out money, and we want to authorize this $43.85 billion to them, to the operators, employees, and artists of live venues, recording venues, cultural spaces, and the related businesses that Jenny talked about. And by doing that, you give them sustenance. You keep them alive. You give them a floor for the next however long this is going to be. And it is such an injection that let's say we are through this in 12 months. Well, thank the universe that the Metropolitan Opera is still there, or that storefront dance studio in Raleigh, North Carolina, or Ann Rosen's theater in Wyoming, who the name I can't remember, that buys lumber from the Home Depot, that every 3 to 4 months hires companies of however many people because we are a people business on both sides of our product. And that's just performing arts. It's not talking about museums and libraries. And because we this isn't, and whether we want to write the story that we are not music over here and theater over here and libraries over here and museums over here. The story we want to write, and this is to Jenny's point also, by collectively bargaining, by coming together in a unified voice, and there are various coalitions that have come together quickly to put out the fire in their own room in this mansion of the arts economy, but by coming together and saying, wait a minute, we are 4.5% of the GDP. And the reason why that economic argument is important is because we are not getting the economic relief we deserve. So we can be an artist that expresses anti-capitalist sentiment, that's fine. But we are living in a capitalist society. Our government has lots of money, and our government should be giving us the economic relief because we're so important to our democracy. The First Amendment is worth $877 billion as of last year. The First Amendment is an economic driver, and I want us to be valued. I want us to be, we are undervalued, we are diminished. There is an oppressive anecdote that by being a starving artist, it is somehow romantic. It's not romantic. It's not romantic. We shouldn't be in this position. One of the things I talk about, because it's so personal to me and I've spent a lot of time studying it, is the labor movement from 1867 to 1930. And what happened during this time at the turn of the century, by the way, AM radio, internet of its time, the light bulb, capturing daylight and extending working hours, railroads, the Facebook, Google, and Amazon of the day were JP Morgan, Rockefeller, and Carnegie, steel railroads and banks. We're in the exact same paradigm right now. We are in a new Gilded Age. Well, what happened then was finally you had unions, you had coal miners and steel workers and rail workers and dock workers and shirtwaist factory workers in the halls of Congress on our nation's most important stage, telling the story of what was going on. Why was striking happening? Why did we need children to leave the textile mills and go to school like the rich kids? If you believed in the 8-hour movement at that time, if you believed in a minimum wage, it was considered treason. It was anarchy. How dare you? How dare you with these radical ideas? The Knights of Labor in Chicago was a radical idea. And they were so radical, they didn't even believe in the strike because they wanted to make peace with the employers. And along comes Mother Jones and says, if you don't have a strike, you have no leverage at all. So people were learning how to collectively bargain. So why we call this a labor movement is because we're saying it's not just playwrights and actors and composers, it's admin, it's custodians, it's valet workers, it's everyone who is a part of every single arts and culture institution in this country, that by calling ourselves arts workers and collectively bargaining under Dawn or whatever legislation it is, by coming together as a union of industry to government saying $43.85 billion is 5% 5%, it's nothing. That is the least you could do to put a floor under us. That's it. So we can be as anti-capitalist as we want. What we are actually saying is in the spirit of collectivism. Please keep us in our homes. Please pay us what we're worth. Look at fair wage on stage. Look at the teachers striking in Oklahoma and West Virginia in the last few years. There is something happening right now at the turn of this century. Andrew Yang talking about UBI. It's in the water right now. We are changing as a nation. So what Be an Arts Hero is doing and the story we are rewriting is absolutely an active and forward-moving part of that. So to answer that, that's what I got to say about that. I can keep going.
I love that, man. I love that so much.
I love it whenever he talks about this.
Labor.
I would love to piggyback on that and then pivot to Morgan's question in the chat. Like, I would love to say that, you know, I am not an expert on global economics, but from what I can see, the most successful economies in the world right now are mixed economies, you know, democratic socialist economies in Scandinavia. And I specifically think about the mixed economy of Germany and how Germany has reliably been, you know, such a cornerstone of European economic power. And I think to myself, okay, well, what's over there going on in Germany that's different? Well, what's going on in Germany is a $2 billion a year arts and culture budget for a country that's about the size of Montana. And so just proportionally, that level of money for that size of a country and the number of people that live there is incredible. And when you think about the arts and culture's kind of outrageous return on investment, you go, oh, well, maybe one of the reasons they're such an economic powerhouse is they disproportionately give state investment into the arts. So that's like one of the things that I think of, and especially in Scandinavia, it's the same way. And then, so Morgan, in some of the Republican offices, when we talk about FPUC and we talk about, you know, the federal pandemic unemployment compensation, that $600 being a disincentive to work, or hearing that we should do something else. One of the things I say is, you don't want me to do anything other than what I'm doing. Because I do what I do, I am part of 4.5% of GDP. I am part of $877 billion in value added to this country. Arts and culture is bigger than transportation, bigger than tourism, bigger than construction, bigger than one of the T's, transportation. We're one of the largest economic drivers in the country. So I kind of go back to the Aaron Sorkin, Colonel Jessup from A Few Good Men. It's like, you want me on that wall. You need me on that wall. And that's part of the economic argument that we're making. It would just, from a granular level, what Matthew was saying, no, what Brooke was saying, there's not a state in this country where, or maybe it was Jenny, we all make the points. We all make the points. But no, the point is, the point is, there is no state in the union that doesn't have tens of thousands of arts workers and contributes billions of dollars. That's Kansas, that's West Virginia, that's New York, that's Florida. So you need us to be doing what we're doing. If we didn't do what we do, we knock into everything else. 68% of tourism is for arts and culture activities. If I'm not on that wall creating the art and the money and the sunshine, boom, tourism. Transportation, hospitality, hotels. Right now in Missouri, the Muni Theater, 12,000 seat outdoor amphitheater, there are 4 restaurants that have closed for good because they did not have a season. You want the Muni up and running. You don't want anybody that works at the Muni doing anything other than what they do. Because if they're not up there singing and dancing, then the restaurants are closed and the lights are off in St. Louis.
And I just want to say, you know, really the only pushback we get often in these senators' rooms has to do with the full extension of FPUC. That tends to be what we get any kind of pushback about. And it tends to be about but what about the disincentive to work? And to that, I always say, that doesn't really apply to our sector. Beyond what Carson said, which is a airtight argument that we use all the time. We are unique in the fact that our identity is so implicitly tied to what we do. Arts workers love what they do, and arts workers feel almost, it is difficult to describe the kind of pain and angst it causes to our sector to not be able to do what we do, right? So, and part of this, again, goes back to our relationship to labor. The reason why the perception of our sector is that our work is luxury or a hobby or not really labor has everything to do with our country's, or rather our world's, relationship to labor in general. The idea that work has to make you miserable, that work has to be painful and has to take actual joy from your life. The idea that you might actually love what you do is basically treason. You know, on a certain level, the idea that you love what you do means that you shouldn't be paid that much. And very often that is inclusive of a lot of public service jobs that actually have a huge benefit to our culture and to the public, that are tragically and criminally underfunded. And it often falls along gendered lines, frankly. The work that tends to be more female driven or more populated with women tends to be paid criminally underpaid. So when we talk about a disincentive to work, it's telling on themselves, isn't it? Because it's saying that people are really miserable doing what they do. And if they had the option to not do it, they would take it. Doesn't that tell on them a little bit? That is their relationship to work? That they think that all work should be something that people would rather not do, and they have to basically be forced into it in a starvation or work scenario? Isn't that interesting? And so, you know, I always say it doesn't really apply to our sector because we love what we do. And for that reason, we tend to be undervalued and undermined and defunded because it's considered, the pleasure is supposed to be ours, right? That we're working. And it's the reason why we're often exploited. Our work is exploited because we do love what we do, and because the relationship to labor in this country is so corrupt, right? Or so corrupted, I guess I should say. And so I guess I want to say one more thing about this, which is we like to make the economic argument because that's the one that gets us in the door of senators and representatives, right? The politicians. But when we talk about why wouldn't you just get a different job? Beyond the actual realities of the fact that there are no jobs, even if we wanted to. And the majority of the jobs that arts workers take, moonlighting or as side hustles or survival jobs or whatever you want to call it, because we are hustlers to our nature, right? Most of us. Those are gone because a lot of them are in the restaurant and hospitality business, right? Beyond that, let's talk about the real implications. Like, let's real talk for a second, because we're amongst friends, about what that means. Everything we know about ourselves as humans, we know through art. When we talk about what we know about history, what we know about the ancient civilizations in Egypt and Mesopotamia and in Aztec civilizations, when we talk about the Greek and Roman civilizations, when we talk about everything we know about ourselves is through the sculptures and the pottery, the cave drawings and paintings. Everything we know about ourselves and our history, we know through our art. And likewise, when we sent a little beacon into space to unknown territories, to planets unknown, What did we send to these other civilizations, these other planets, these other species to say, this is what humans are. This is what we have. This is what we are. We sent our art. So when we talk about the consequences of letting our culture implode, you know, it's not an over-exaggeration to talk about it like a dying star. It's not an exaggeration to talk about it like, you know, if our sun explodes or implodes rather, it doesn't just take the surrounding solar system, it creates a black hole.
Like, I would like to pivot out of the economic argument that we usually talk about, and I'd like to pivot into some facts about art. So they have found that in a theater, that within 10 to 15 minutes of the curtain going up, that the heartbeats of the people in the room start to sync up. They have also found that in high school age children, that if they see just one play, just one, years later, they test higher on empathy and cooperation and kindness. And given the world that we are living in, given the country that we are living in, given the generation that is coming up that we just got a little guest star from, it is so important to the humanity and the soul of this country that the arts and culture sector survive, and that we do what we do at the highest level, because the consequences of us going away, the standard bearers of compassion, affection, respect, showing people what it's like to walk inside another person's shoes. Joseph Campbell said there's not one fortunately composed piece of art that doesn't say the same thing. They all say the exact same thing, which is, you're not alone, and we're all in this together. And I just can't think of anything more relevant to the moment we all just experienced, like looking into our future without us.
Carson, thank you for that. It feels like a very recentering moment. So I'm very, very grateful that you dipped in with that, because it's really freaking important. Something that weighs on my mind, Christine and folks, as we talk about what's happening in this crisis, how it's affecting all of us, the devastating toll, the human toll, the systemic economic collapse. I think about the future that we want to rebuild, right? I think about the opportunity we have to come out of this crisis better. I think about if the slate has been wiped clean, if we have been given a chance to have the kind of world that we should have built decades ago. And if this crisis is bringing up all of the issues of social, racial inequalities, it's shining a light on the fact that we can do something about that, right? It's also handing us the opportunity and saying, well, what are you going to do with it? If we have a change in administration, there is the prospect, the hope of rebuilding this landscape for all of us in this room, everyone who's watching, to have the kind of community, culture that is the best of us, right? We're in a time of Black Lives Matter. We're in a time of We See You White American Theater. And it's been a long time coming. And while we're in this time of reckoning, worldwide reckoning, I feel immense responsibility as a Japanese American woman, a Japanese artist. I feel immense responsibility as an arts worker. I feel immense responsibility as a part of this labor movement, so that we as individuals and we as a collective are living up to what we can be. So for anyone who's watching, I feel like what's at the heart of everything we're about and what we're trying to accomplish with Be an Arts Hero, at the heart of it is the notion that we have the chance to make some immense change in this moment. And if we don't all take it, and if we don't all play our part, if we don't all take on our own individual responsibility in that change, then we've lost an incredible moment that we've been given right now. And we need to seize that. But that means we all need to stand up and voice what needs to change, and play an active role in making that happen every damn day. If that means calling your senator every damn day, then you need to do it. So I'm like a little shaken by that really strange and awful interruption, but what a strange godsend in a way, because as Carson said, it's forcing us to realize that that's what we're dealing with, folks. Like we're fighting against changing all of these old paradigms, and we as thought leaders and arts workers and artists, we're the ones who can change that. And it's a change in hearts and minds. But that's why people look to us, right? That's why they always try to silence us, because we are the ones who can influence and affect that change. So in a weird way, it's a gift.
Christine, I saw you had your finger up.
Yeah, I mean, I think as a kind of, both Brooke and Carson, thank you for shifting us, and I'm very sorry that this happened. But Brooke sort of touches on this, which is I'm interested in, for those of us who are still here, and for those of us who are, for those who are watching through the Facebook Zoom, I'd love to hear what you guys, what is one thing that someone who is either an arts worker or someone who values the arts and culture, what is one thing that someone can do today? And what is one thing they can do tomorrow? And what is one thing they can do, like, obviously there are things we can do in November, right? But what is something that we could do now? And what is something that we can do tomorrow?
Brooke has a really great answer to this, and I want to pass the ball to her, but I also really want to just talk a little bit about this. Democracy is a verb, and we have to exercise. It's just like a muscle in our body that we use it or we lose it, right? And I think that if anything, right now, 2020 has taught us that if we don't use our democracy, we will lose it. And so now is the time to like really crunch, you know, really work hard and exercise those muscles like you've never exercised those muscles before. So I want to remind everyone who's watching that those in power, they're not your bosses, you're their bosses. We are supposed to be in an elected representative democracy, one where we ask someone to represent us in government and to listen to their constituents, the people, and enact laws that help those people. So anytime that government doesn't do exactly that, it is a failure. And we can talk about the many different ways with which that hasn't happened. But at this point, we the people need to do our jobs so that we can point to the people who are maybe not doing their jobs and say, we did our part. We told you what we needed. So, so with that, I will just say, call, write, tweet, email, sign an action network. It's all on our website. Your senators and your representatives every day. Do not let up. Do not stop. I know there's a lot to devote your time to and a lot of necessary causes, but now is the time to not stop. And with that, I will pass the mic to Brooke.
You know, Jenny has done an incredible job with our website and our resources. If you go to beanartshero.com, if you go to our Instagram at beanartshero, we give you literally a short little script where you can call your senators, and if you're phone shy, we wrote it for you. We give you an entire spreadsheet of every single senator's contact info, phone number, all of their handles on social media. We give you an Action Network template letter where you literally just type in your name and your zip code and press send, and you got it. We have an open letter to the U.S. Senate that Matthew-Lee Erlbach has penned that you can add your name to. There are so many ways you can engage, and I cannot say this enough. It doesn't feel like much because you can't see the effect, right? But just the responsibility we have as individuals, because each individual adds up, right? If all 5.1 million arts workers tweeted, tagged, called, or wrote their senators, their two senators every damn day, can you imagine if they wrote, if all of us wrote our senators, contacted our senators every damn day, then they would have to pay attention, right? And it's proven in our senator meetings. You know, we'll bring in a constituent and they'll say, "Oh, are you the ones who've been bugging us, who've been tagging us in all those tweets?" So that's living proof, right, folks? That they pay attention, they have to document it, and they have to respond if you are their constituent. So I cannot stress enough. Do your part every day for not only for yourself, but for the collective. And something I want to say in a more macro level or more philosophical level, something people can do right now, Christine, start having these conversations with your friends, start having these conversations with your colleagues, with your employers, with your employees, with your unions. The more people who are waking up to this new way of thinking, the faster we're going to change the paradigm, right? If you are demanding more because you know you're worth more, and everyone is demanding more because they know they're worth more, that collective consciousness pushes the needle forward so much faster. We are so behind, folks. We have a lot of catching up to do. So have these conversations. You know, something Nicole Salter said in one of our panels is she wants all of it. She said in rebuilding and talking about in the future we want to build together, she wishes that we could all treat each other like beloved family, and that just stuck with me. And I think about that. If we are not only advocating for ourselves, but advocating for our brethren, you know, for our kindreds, our kin, our family, as beloved family, you know, then we're shifting that consciousness, we're shifting that paradigm because we're taking care of each other, right? But as we said at the top of this conversation, we can't do that alone. The museum sector can't do that alone. The library sector can't do that alone. Operas, symphonies, dance, you know, visual artists, you know, none of these lanes, like they gotta merge, right? So I think something that is gratifying and heartening to me and inspiring to me is the idea that this can be, through this incredibly devastating crisis, we have been given an opportunity to become our own heroes, right? We have been given an opportunity to be, this is our Arts Avengers Assemble moment. Like, we are all convening and joining forces right now. And can you imagine what we can do together if we all maximize what we're capable of? But first, that starts with you. First, that starts with you looking at yourself and saying, oh, I have the power to do that. And then if I band together with Jenny, and then if I band together with Matthew and Luke and Lee and Carson and all these folks and everyone who's watching this and everyone, you know, everyone who's in my friend group and everyone who's in my community theater, blah, 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 right? Can you imagine the impact and the power that you have as a collective? So that heartens me. And folks, for anyone who's listening, I just say, know your own power and know that your voice counts and your voice can make a difference. And if we all put our voices together and we're all singing that same damn song, that choir, that noise, that cannot be drowned out.
And to a certain extent, you know, it really is nonpartisan. When you look at Save Our Stages, that was introduced by John Cornyn, Republican of Texas, with Amy Klobuchar, because the economic argument of small music venues had been made. Like the National Independent Venue Association had compellingly made their case. And when they did, both sides of the aisle heard it. One of the stories that I like to tell is we reached out to a certain senator, and their arts portfolio person got back to us, a Republican senator, and their arts portfolio person said, this state doesn't have a whole lot going on arts-wise, you know, go knock on another door. And so we said, well, it's this many tens of thousands of jobs, it's this many billions of dollars to your state. That person's chief of economic policy called us back up. And we had an hour-long conversation. And at the end, that economic policy advisor said, your argument is unimpeachable. All you're saying is that 4.5% of GDP got left out of the relief conversation in April with the CARES Act, and that you want to be put back into the conversation. And we're like, yeah. And I just want to say that, yeah, I amplify what Jenny said. We're in the midst of these, you know, concurrent cataclysmic crises, and they all deserve our attention, and they all deserve our focus. And it is an exhausting time to be a United States citizen. And this is the place where we are trying to be a signal that cuts through the noise to try to save our corner of the universe. And when you call, it matters. You know, it's data. You could just call, you literally could call and just say arts relief and hang up the phone. And they would be like, okay, there's one more that. You know what I mean? Call up and say Dawn Act. They're like, Dawn Act? You know, it really is. You can build it into your daily ritual. And, you know, it took me a long time, even as an actor, it took me a long time to get over my nerves of calling an office. And now I spend hours a day inside senators' offices in states I don't live in at all. I'm like, it's great to be here in the great state of Utah's Senate office. Let's talk about Utah art. You know, so it's very surreal to go from, even though I'm an actor, I'm actually quite shy. And so like reaching out to cold call is intimidating, but you get used to it, and you can do it every day, and it can be fast, and nobody's going to be mean to you, and nobody's going to yell at you, and you do get taken seriously. Jenny.
And we have scripts. If you're nervous, if you're phone shy like I am, on our website, beanartshero.com, you can click on the Get Involved or Get Involved button, and we have scripts. We make it very, very, very easy for you. We have a database full of the senators' handles and phone numbers and emails, and we have scripts so that you can call. But Matthew had his finger up, so I'm just going to pass the mic.
Yeah, so what everyone said, every meeting we have, it's about coalitions and who in the districts and in the state are calling to representatives. So just to reiterate what everyone said, it's putting pressure, it's calling, it's emailing, it's tagging your representatives on social media, it's giving them no room to go except to say, okay, I cry uncle, yes, I will support the Dawn Act, yes, I will support arts relief. That is what has to happen. That's what lobbyists do. They create coalitions and they organize and mobilize. That's what campaigns do. They mobilize constituencies and say, you gotta pass this. So if everyone on this call tells 10 friends to do that and they tell 10 friends, then suddenly we are like Nexium and we will just take over the country. Bad analogy. Don't watch the doc series. Kind of do. It's crazy. Okay, look, anyway, so you get it.
Nobody is doing volleyball in the middle of the night, Matthew.
But they will. This is my point. The other thing I'll say is buy art, because we vote with our dollars. So if you purchase, whatever theaters that's doing their live stream, or if you're purchasing art, every time you spend $1, you're voting, you're saying, yes, I want this. Yes, no, I don't want this. Yes, I want this. So you're also helping the arts economy. We have to continue to be arts consumers. I also wanted to just address something else that Luke had said, the second part of that, which was how do we prevent artists from becoming instrumentalized in the gentrification of neighborhoods? This is such a good question. This is less about artists and more about the work that we are doing in our communities at the local level to make sure that economic justice is received, because we are persisting on it being something that is part of our policy, part of our legislation, which is keeping rents low, making sure that, I lived in West Village for years, Bleecker Street is blighted because the tax write-off of having an empty storefront is worth more than not having, that's worth more than having a tenant in there because the rent is so high. So it's a tax write-off. It's making sure that our legislation, look, NATR, National Association of Talent Reps, they say 90 to 95% income loss right now. They're pissing money into brick and mortars that they can't live in because there's a law in New York saying if you're an agency, you have to have a brick and mortar. Well, what good is that doing them now? They can't go into it. So we have to make sure that our local laws are friendly to arts workers everywhere so that we can keep being in our communities. I mean, the number of arts organizations in New York, I'm just talking about New York and New York alone, that have fallen under, yeah, we come up and then once people are attracted to that community, we're thrown out. So we have to make sure that being an artist inherently is a political act, whether we want it to be or not, because all art is political. And the final thing I'll say, and then I'll pass it over to Brooke, is the American Federation of Labor and the Congress of Industrial Organizations were two separate groups. Now they comprise like 50 to 60 unions, trade unions together. The reason why they came together was because they were more powerful as opposed to competing against each other, to come together unified, saying we are going to organize these unions and fight for the same thing. And the AFL-CIO is, you know, the AFL-CIO, Teamsters, very, very important. That's what we're asking for here. And we're doing it across sectors. So the other thing I would say, in addition to what everyone's saying, which is continue to pressure your representatives, we have to change our paradigm of what economic justice is. Because when we're through this, we can't accept scraps again. We cannot. So that's the other thing, is reframing for ourselves, so we never forget, so we don't get nervous about asking for what we're worth, so we don't get nervous about saying to our colleague, hey, you know what, this isn't right, we should organize together and we should fix this. And I think that's also really important. Brooke, you had your finger up.
You know, I would say along those lines, Matthew, it's about making your needs known, because our reps don't know how to serve you if you're not loud about it, right? If you're not communicating what your needs are, how are they to know what your needs are? So when we go into these senator and House rep meetings, you know, many of them are like, well, it's a good thing you gave us all these stats because like we didn't know how bad it was. Now we know what you need. But it's about communicating what the needs are, getting very vocal about it, and getting everyone you know to be very vocal about it. That's the second part of that. Is some people are not positioned to have that leverage, whether it's you know, for disadvantaged communities, you know, they are not listened to. They're often sidelined, right? So the other part of this discussion is we have to have more conversations about barriers to access. We have to have more conversations about how to serve the most marginalized communities, because oftentimes they do not have the resources or the access to be able to advocate for themselves like we do, right? I can get the ear of a union, a guild, a coalition, etc. Some people do not have that privilege, right? So a larger part of this conversation for us, and what we're really curious about and that we're really digging into the belly fat of right now, is as we talk about getting this money from Congress, and we talk about the dispersal entities that we want that money to funnel through, we have to talk about how to ensure that there are no barriers to access so that that money can free flow fairly to everyone who needs it the most.
I also want to say, so we're talking about relief now, and exactly what Brooke said, as we're building out the Dawn Act and the specific bill language, our dispersal infrastructure, which is NEA, CPB, IMLS, NEH, there are rules and regulations in place that do provide barriers for certain people to get access. The intelligible principle of our legislation is we are going to deconstruct those barriers. And so the idea is where the money can get to where it needs to go, to the most distressed people, especially in those other communities. And also just kind of on a macro thought process about the arts in this country and the racial reckoning that is happening around the arts in this country. So because there is not a healthy and appropriate and robust federal and state funding for arts across the country, you wind up into a situation where much of the not-for-profit theater, not theater, just arts in general, is reliant on boards, right? And those boards, the only way those people are able to be on those boards is through money. So who has money in this country? So those people are sitting on the boards. And so then the artistic institutions have to mirror what those boards would like to see. And so one of the ways that we dismantle white supremacy and white patriarchal supremacy is by having collective funding and investment in this incredibly important part of our culture. And the more that an artistic institution is able to make a decision based off of the artistic point of view of the artists who are there, rather than a board of directors who are exerting influence, the faster we're going to be able to get to the places that we want to go. Just as a thought.
So fantastic. Thank you so much, Carson. Invited any questions from our participants, but perhaps as we let those questions come rolling in, you guys have really sort of gained so much speed in the last 12 months. It's really incredible to see. It's really exciting. And I wondered if you could talk about, and there's a way in which, it's wonderful to, you come to us so polished and persuasive and passionate. And I wonder if you could speak to a discovery that you made or you experienced, something that surprised you along this 12-week journey. That would be really amazing to hear if there was something that, that happened that you really had no idea, something that changed your mind or something that you discovered or something that surprised you. So I see Brooke.
Well, I'll say it's only been like 2 months and like a week, less than 3 months, right, y'all? Like two months and a week, 2 months and 2 weeks.
Like June 25th was launch. So
okay, so we are still in our infancy. I would say the most surprising thing for me is I never imagined that I would be in pandemic, for one, but I never imagined I would be spending pandemic. I would be in the fall, almost the fall of 2020, lobbying Congress. Never imagined that. So as we take meetings with people of power, with Congress people, I sometimes we look at each other and we're like, we didn't set out to be career lobbyists, politicians, etc. We're artists, activists, organizers for sure. But I think perhaps that's part of the charm of how grassroots we are, and the reason why perhaps we have been gaining so much momentum and garnering so much support, Christine, is that we're scrappy and we are figuring out as we go, and we try to stay as humble as we can. But I think the biggest I think revelation for me is that, wow, look at the fact that we didn't necessarily set out to try to change the world or save the world, but the reason why people are supporting us is because they recognize there's a need. And so all of us kind of woke up to the fact that, oh wow, we're helping to fill a need right now. And that was very paradigm shifting for me to know that there was a gap and that we're somehow filling that right now. So that was a big thing.
I get a little hippy dippy about it recently. I've been just thinking about the trajectory of my life, right? And my earliest memory is one of music. It's listening to the sound of music when I was, younger than 3. It's my first memory, and it's burned into my brain. Like it just like a branding iron, just seared right into my kid brain, being like, yes, that's what I want. That's what I love. That's what I need. And the many winding paths it has taken me to get to where I am right now suddenly makes sense to me. all the failures, all the setbacks, all of the many ways with which I've approached my life and seen how a lot of the pain or the trauma has informed my life and my compassion, my empathy, and my ability to grow and learn and change. And I'm a work in progress, obviously. But I just, it all, you asked about surprises. At a certain point, I was like, oh, maybe there is, I mean, I'm an agnostic, but maybe there is some kind of intelligent design or plan to this, because it feels like so many things have led to this, and that I wouldn't be who I am in this moment with these people that I love and cherish and respect, if all the events of my life hadn't happened just so. And I have that realization about 20 times a day. For better or for worse. But, like there are times where I'm just like, oh, I wish that thing hadn't happened to me when in the 12th grade, because I would have reacted much differently to that meeting, but there are times when I'm grateful for everything, every single event in my life now, because it has led to right now, right here with these people in this room. So I think, I don't know, that was one of those things where I suddenly felt like something made sense or clicked in the universe for me. I don't know if that's, like I told you, it's pretty hippy dippy, but Carson?
Christine, it's so funny, because this idea of us being polished and persuasive, thank you very much, because still on a day-to-day basis, like we feel like we're, crashing into walls and making mistakes. And like one of our earliest talking points was completely and totally wrong. And you know what I mean? Like it got out into the world and we're like, how do we pull that talking point back in? It's just wrong. And so we're like learning as we go, and we're scrambling and we're learning how to work with each other. I mean, we're 3 months in and we're only just now kind of like building out an organizational structure for like, we think that we're going to be doing this for a while. And so if we're going to be doing this for a while, we have to make it sustainable. So we're like learning how to do that, because, we still like today, we started the day at 11 a.m. Eastern time. And, here we are, like we're just going to go, and we're going to get off of the salon, and we all have like 2 or 3 more hours of homework to do tonight. So so what we're learning is we can't continue to do it exactly this way. Like we're gonna continue this work, but we've got to figure out how to do it in a more sustainable way. But the other thing that's been surprising that I've learned, so the other day we were in Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith's office in Mississippi, and I believe the gentleman's name was Shane Waller, who we talked to, and he was such a great guy. And I do want to say that no matter what your idea of, this political party or that political party, they all have very kind staffs. You know what I mean? Like pretty much everybody are pretty sweet. Like about 98% of them are very, they're just polite and kind. But anyway, I was in there, and Shane Waller said, after I kind of got done with my pitch, he said, y'all have just been around for 10 or 11 weeks. And I said, yeah, we're new. And he said, well, my knowledge of the arts and culture sector is about a mile wide and an inch deep, but nobody's come in here and put it like that for me before. Like I've never heard it said the way that you said it. Some people come in and they ask for this or they ask for that, or they talk about this kind of building or that kind of building or this kind of club or theater or whatever, but nobody's come in here and just talked about the creative economy like that. And that's been a surprise for us, is that we're like, oh, maybe we are stepping into like, we're something new. We're having a different kind of conversation. And here's the deal, like we are lobbyists. Like we realized that we're lobbyists. Like we're in there talking to policymakers about specific legislation. But here's the thing, no one's paying us. Like we are lobbyists on behalf of the known universe that we know. And I don't know that anybody, I mean, I don't want to undermine other amazing lobbyists, but I mean, talk about skin in the game. I lost my federal pandemic unemployment compensation on July 25th, like everybody else, and my bank account is a gas tank that's going down and down and down. And, you know, I'm part of the universe I'm trying to save, you know.
This is the, you know, I'm gonna answer the question, Christine, but to Carson's point, we're not doing this because we want to, we're doing it because we have to. And the people that we are talking about every day is us. This is very life or death for people who are volunteering their time for us. And we have an incredible team of volunteers. And it is, what is revelatory to me about that and to what Carson is saying is that when you are audacious and you are bold and you are really clear and gracious, you can get a lot done. And people will give their time and talent. And we are so incredibly privileged to have the people we do working with us and grateful. But the revelation for me was, you know, I had, for the last few years, I had like, you know, there's volunteer work I do every year. I work with this homeless organization in Los Angeles, and I always want to do more. It's never enough. And like, I always, you know, civic work. It's like a note that I write to myself at the beginning of every year. And then every few months I'd write it again and I'd look at it like, there's just no time. I got to write this script. I got to do this thing. And there was always this part of the back of my head that said, how the hell am I ever going to build something like that? Who's ever going to come around and do that? Like, how do I get people to be a part of something like that? And what was so revelatory was when I met Jenny and Carson, and I already knew Brooke, but I remember the first meeting we had, it was a Sunday night. I was in my living room and like the letter was the thing that was being discussed. And I was really nervous. And I thought to myself, oh man, like, I hope they trust me to do this thing. And then we got off the call and Jenny said this really brilliant thing that I'll never forget. And I was just like, I got up and Carson, I like heard about in Fair Wage. And I was just so impressed with that whole movement. Like, oh, you can do this. We can do this. The stuff that I read about and study that's important to me, like feels like out there, you know, like how did AEA get started? Well, it got started by people like us. So the thing that was revelatory, the things that been most revelatory for me is that it can happen. And that if you build it, they will come. And I like knew that intellectually, but I'm living it right now. And that is, this is life-changing. This is life-changing. So the revelation of if you put in that work and you do it with people that share that, you know, paradigm and that, you know, belief, that philosophy, and grow together in that. And, you know, there's lots of growing pains inside of that, but like, when you have that baseline, you know, respect for the people that you're working with, that's revelatory for me. That like, look at what you can build. Like anybody can do it. It's to Jenny said, it's democracy is a verb, but like we're verbing it out right now, and it's really cool. So yeah, that's my revelation is like, oh, this can happen. This is real. You can do this.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. So we usually, like, in the rhythm of things, we would be shifting over to more Q&A. And I think at this point, we did lose some people during the Zoom bomb, and I'm really sad about that. And you did talk about how you're going to do 2 or 3 hours more homework tonight before you go on. So perhaps as a kind of final thing, before I release everybody early, although there is the space to mingle if people want to mingle, what is on the horizon? What's next on the action plan for you guys?
Well, I'll tell you, a big goal is a Secretary of the Arts as a cabinet level position. That's a macro goal.
We have some things coming down the pike that I'm not sure, are we able to talk about yet? Matthew, are we able to talk about that yet?
The robots? We can talk about the robots.
Yeah, the ones with the lasers.
Yeah. Let's talk about
So
it.
solar system and robots with lasers.
Look, this is, I told you Nexium. Wait, Jenny, which thing are you talking about?
I'm talking about,
This?
yeah.
Oh,
The
yes.
drones?
No, yeah. Jenny, you want to do it?
No, I want you to do it.
So we have October 1st, we're launching this national campaign with Theater for Young Audiences USA, TYA USA, iPay and AATA, and it's a letter writing campaign called hashtag Arts Are My Superpower, as per Be an Arts Hero. And it's going to be kids and teens writing their representatives to pass the Dawn Act for arts relief, to save the arts economy. And part of what it is because kids can't sing in their choirs or, be with their friends making plays and their art classes. We want them to express their art superpower. Show us your art superpower. We want to engage kids and teens in this national letter writing campaign. And it's we're really excited about it because I think our reach is 6 million kids across the country, and arts educators, those are jobs. Those are arts worker jobs. And I saw this video the other day of this teacher. Oh my God, it'll make me start crying. First or second grade teacher. And she's like teaching her class and she is so in it. God, how exhausting must that be to teach a third grade class? And I was watching that and I was like, think about all the arts teachers and arts educators out there who are, who don't get to be with their students right now. So this is our way of embracing that loss. And to Carson's point of being, a kid, 67% of, or I forget the statistic of kids who go to see a play end up, that's more compassion, more empathy, but also they become arts consumers later in life. And don't like using the word consumers, but because we're having an economic conversation, that's the language I'm using. But I understand this isn't about consumption. This is about, human expression. So forgive me for using that language, but it's gonna be a very exciting campaign. And so hashtag Arts Are My Superpower, look for it, tell all the kids you know. I don't know how many you know, but if you have kids or you're in relationship to teens and youth, tell them this is a big thing and you can look for it on October 1st on our site.
Yeah, when we started, we were just going as hard and as fast as we can for immediate relief because that's what the sector needs right now. And that still is 98% of our focus. But as Brooke intimated, 2% of our focus is looking down the line. And we're looking to completely change the conversation in the country about the creative economy. And that does start with a cabinet level position. We're $265 billion more a year added to the GDP than transportation. And there is a Secretary of Transportation. We're $877 billion. There needs to be a Secretary of the Creative Economy. We are too big to fail. We do need to have a different kind of relationship with the federal government. And also, I think about Jenny Gersten wrote this incredible piece in Bloomberg a few weeks ago talking about, the creative economy as a cornerstone to an economic recovery. And she just talked about, sleepy North Adams, Massachusetts in the Berkshires, which was kind of a hollowed out factory town that was really economically depressed after the huge factory. I forget which kind of a factory it was, but it closed down. And it was just kind of a hollowed out, sad town for a long time. And then Mass Mocha was built, and all of a sudden, there's, coffee shops and restaurants and bed and breakfasts, and it's a destination all over the world. And it's people from North Adams that work at the museum, and it's provided jobs for the people in North Adams. And on the other side of this crisis, we're headed into a deep, dark winter, and the American economy is only going to get worse, and it's only going to need more help. And the only entity that can give it that help is the federal government. So the idea that coming out of the COVID crisis, on the other side of 1918, 1919, we came into the roaring 20s, right? And after the bubonic plague, we came into the Renaissance. And so the idea that on the other side of this, that we could go to little towns and big towns that have been hollowed out that are cratered with empty storefronts and boarded up windows, and turn those into burlesque clubs and comedy clubs and live music venues and new art centers and, you know, like community, you know, kids art education, arts therapy for vets, you know, just like the idea of being able to like release the full power of the creative economy to rebound the United States economy is, to me, that's a way that I'm able to go to sleep at night, is envisioning those things. And like, by the way, Fair Wage on Stage started with me just asking one question. I didn't realize it was a revolutionary question, but the question was just, what would our contracts look like if they were perfect? I didn't realize that that was a revolutionary question, but that question turned into one of the most significant labor negotiations, contract negotiations in the history of Actors Equity Association. And, you know, so we're entertaining, you know, as Be an Arts Hero, like, what would the country look like if it had a perfect relationship with the creative economy? It's kind of a revolutionary question to ask. Go ahead, Jenny.
No, I just want to point to Edward, who had a question.
Oh, it was really just more of a comment. Forgive me, but if not enough people have thanked you today for what you're doing, just thank you so very much for all that you're doing. And I wanted to ask, because Wingspace is a pretty design-heavy group, you know, how one could contribute. But I just went on your website, and I don't know who's in charge of the graphics and the drive, the graphics yard, but I just congratulations, you're doing an amazing job. You don't need anyone's help. And it's all simple and easy to use. And I think the world of all of you and what you were doing. And that was, sorry, it's not a very good question. But anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there into the space.
Jenny and Allie.
It's me and Allie Wonderly and Grace Hoffman who do it started with just me, and then it just became too much for just me, and we brought in 2 more volunteers. Casey Chow has also joined the team, but the vast majority of it, that if you look at the older stuff, that's all me. And in the last month, we've added month and maybe some change now at this point, Allie Wonderly, Casey Chow, and Gracie Hoffman are our graphics team, and they do phenomenal work, and we're really, really grateful to them. So thank you. I mean, I'm an autodidact, and I take that very, I take that as a high compliment from those who are actually, this is what they do.
All right, thanks everybody. I think we are gonna wrap things up. So as we normally do, we hold space for anybody who wants to linger and chat with each other. If not, good night, be well, stay safe, and come back to another Wingspace Salon. Thank you so much to Carson, Matthew-Lee, Jenny, Grace, and Brooke. We really appreciate all of the work that you're doing. Just all of that work that you are doing, and, you know, battle on, and we are here with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.